Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 700 for May 24th, 2018. Coming up in a few minutes.
The bow wave of interest has been phenomenal. People have been talking about it, trying to get, it's a bit like a new car launch, trying to sneak pictures inside before it's open. It's become an incredible amount, an absolute tsunami of interest in this particular place.
The Macallans' new $188 million distillery along Scotland's River Spey has been running for a few months now, but Edrington finally opened it to visitors for the first time this week with a celebration the other night. We'll talk with the Macallans' Ken Grier about the new distillery and get his reaction to last Friday's Bonhams whiskey auction in Hong Kong, in which two rare bottles of the Macallan 1926 both sold for more than $1 million each. That's coming up on WhiskyCast in Depth. I'll also have the calendar of events, your voice, the What I'm Tasting This Week department, and on Behind the Label, we'll talk about a label and get the backstory on the twin lions that appear on the White and Mackay label. That's all ahead on this edition of WhiskyCast.
This is whiskey, Johnnie Walker's Scotch Whisky, from this place and these people, aye, Scotch makers, creating the bold and complex flavour of Johnnie Walker Black Label. Step right up.
WhiskyCast, brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot-still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by Highland Park. We're starting to see some progress on the revival of Diageo's Port Ellen and Brora distilleries in Scotland. It's been quiet on both fronts since the initial announcement last October. But now, Diageo has appointed project managers for both distilleries. Lagavulin Distillery kicks off the annual Isla Festival of Malt and Music with its open day on Saturday, and after the Fay Gilles ends next weekend, distillery manager Georgie Crawford will move down the road a couple of miles to lead the Port Ellen revival. When we last talked with her in October of 2016, she had hoped to finish out her career at Lagavulin.
When I was doing some research for the tasting I did for the festival this year, for the 200 year, I went through the list of managers, the same managers who are actually listed on the bottle of 25-year-old, and one of them had actually over 40 years service. So at my tasting, we had 200 of us did the tasting together, was actually the head of distillation and maturation for Diageo Scotland. So I maybe made a point about him being 40 years doing his job, and you don't really need to keep rotating managers. So I like to think that as long as I keep on giving and doing the job that I'm doing, hopefully I don't put my head too far above the parapet.
Nice try, Georgie. Of course, that was about the time the secret discussions began within Diageo on reviving Port Ellen and Brora, and with the craziness on Isla heading into this weekend, Georgie was not available for an interview. We hope to talk to her soon. In a Diageo news release, she called the opportunity to bring Port Ellen Distillery back to life a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She'll be replaced at Lagavulin by Colin Gordon, who's been managing the Port Ellen maltings next to the old distillery. And up at Brora in the Highlands, Stuart Duncan will move across the road from Clynelish to lead up that project. He's been part of the management team at Clynelish. Both revival projects are still expected to be completed during 2020. We've reported before that the Scotch whisky industry had a record year for exports last year, with £4.37 billion worth of Scotch exported worldwide. Now, the Scotch Whisky Association has released a new report showing whisky's impact on the overall UK trade deficit. While that deficit fell last year, the SWA claims it would have been almost 3% higher if those Scotch whisky exports were taken out of the equation. Scotch whisky accounted for 1.3% of all UK exports during the year. Meanwhile, The Guardian reports that ongoing secret trade talks between Great Britain and the United States could have an impact on the whiskey industry. While the British government technically can't start negotiating its own free trade treaties until after Brexit next year, The Guardian reports that preliminary talks over the scope of a deal have been going on in secret and were uncovered in an investigation by Greenpeace. According to that report, the U.S. wants Britain to drop the current legal requirement that whiskey be matured for at least 3 years, in order to make it easier for American companies to sell younger spirits in the UK. That 3-year requirement is part of both UK and European law, and the U.S. Trade Representative's annual report on international trade barriers cites it as a point for future negotiations. The Americans also want an end to so-called geographic indicators for food and drinks, which could include Scotch whisky. What we do not know is whether the U.S. is willing to throw bourbon makers under the bus by ending those same protections for bourbon. We have reached out to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, and we'll have more on this story if we receive a response. Last month, we heard from Gordon and MacPhail's Stephen Rankin on the shakeup in the family-owned whiskey company's ranges, and what might be described as the entry-level range at Gordon and MacPhail has now been unveiled. The Discovery range is designed for whiskey drinkers just beginning their exploration into single malts.
As the consumer comes into whiskey, they will begin to understand what style they begin to like. So, for example, is it that sweeter bourbon-style maturation that they're enjoying? Is it a richer sherry-style maturation they're enjoying? Or are they enjoying the smokier components from a whiskey? So the Discovery range will actually help people go, do you know what, I really like that one, and I understood it was sweeter in style. Right, I'm going to try this section here, which is bourbon-matured whiskies. Now, the packaging and the definition of those are really going to help people come into it, but raise the game. So I really enjoyed that. Now, what's that one? Right. And then all the details will cascade from the profile of the whiskey. So for the sherry ones, is it a Glenrothes? Is it a Glentarret? If it's a sweeter style, is it, a Tormore, or is it a Glenspey or a Strathmill or something? Or is it, and for the smoky ones, is that more a Kalila or a heavily peated Bunnahabhain, for example? So that becomes much more interesting for people who are getting into whiskey but have already made the first step.
Prices for the Discovery range malts will start at around £50, about $67 at current exchange rates, and feature the new Gordon and MacPhail packaging we mentioned last month. Updates for Gordon and MacPhail's distillery labels and private collection ranges will be unveiled later this year. And speaking of unveiling, Irish Distillers has just unveiled 2 new whiskies in its Method and Madness range of experimental whiskies from Midleton Distillery. In fact, we're recording this episode as the release party goes on in Dublin tonight. The 28-years-old Ruby Port Pipe and the single pot still Hungarian Oak Finish are the first additions to the range since it made its debut in the fall of 2016. We'll have more on both of them in this weekend's WhiskyCast, but I will have my tasting notes for them later on. There's word out of Scotland that Halewood Wines and Spirits is planning to build a distillery for its John Crabby & Company Scotch whiskies. JustDrinks.com reports that Halewood plans to invest about $9.4 million into a facility in Leith, just outside of Edinburgh. The Crabby brand was revived recently with 2 sourced single malts, a 30-year-old Speyside and an 8-year-old Highland malt, after the brand was used primarily for Halewood's ginger beer for many years. We should also note that Halewood has also confirmed that the privately held company is being put up for sale, with investment bankers looking at strategic options for shareholders. One final note. Last week, we heard from IndyCar driver Jay Howard and Matt Colglazier of Indiana's Big Red Liquors about their plan to put the names of 500 Big Red customers on Jay's car for this Sunday's Indianapolis 500. Jay qualified for the race this past weekend, and he'll roll off 28th on the grid when the green flag flies. Here's wishing Jay and all of the field a safe and fast race on Sunday. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com. The news is brought to you by Highland Park, the Orkney single malt with Viking soul. If you haven't tried Highland Park's 17-year-old The Dark single malt, get your hands on some while you still can. The Dark was named the best single malt Scotch 13 to 19 years old in the recent San Francisco World Spirits Competition, and look for its counterpart, the double gold medal winning The Light, at a whiskey shop near you. Find out more at highlandparkwhiskey.com. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events. The Strath in Victoria, British Columbia, hosts the Dram Association's Tasting and Whiskey Trivia Challenge this Saturday, May 26th. The Kensington Wine Market in Calgary, Alberta, has an Ardbeg dinner with Brendan Macallan from the distillery coming up on Tuesday, May 29th. New York City's chapter of Women Who Whiskey hosts Linda Ruffenach of the Whiskey Chicks for a tasting and book signing for her new book, How to Be a Bourbon Badass, on May 31st at the New York Distilling Company in Brooklyn. Whiskey Live Louisville is June 2nd. The Kentucky Bourbon Affair is June 5th through the 10th in Louisville. The Whiskey Jubilee is June 7th in New York City. Whiskey Live Melbourne is June 8th and 9th in Australia. And the Scotch Whisky Experience in Edinburgh, Scotland, has a tasting of William Grant & Sons whiskies on June 9th. Right now, we have 308 different events on our searchable calendar at WhiskyCast.com. There's bound to be at least one near you.
Redbreast fans have always cherished our whiskey's sherry notes, so we set out to embellish that character. Introducing the Redbreast Listowel edition, a quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey finished in first fill Oloroso sherry casks from Spain's prestigious Bodegas Listowel. Carrying Redbreast's trademark pot still spices and dark dried fruit notes, the Listowel edition is graced with an enduring sherry finish that would be better described as a final act. Discover the newest branch on the Redbreast family tree.
WhiskyCast In Depth is brought to you by Lagavulin. Archaeologists believe it took the Egyptians 23 years to build the Great Pyramid at Giza. Paris's Notre Dame Cathedral took almost 200 years to complete. So, by those measures, the 3.5 years needed to build the new Macallan distillery in Scotland was a fast-track process, although the planning and design work pretty much doubled that time. Still, it is one of the longest distillery construction projects on record. People have been trying to get a look inside for months now, but security around the construction site was about as tight as Area 51. And that is an appropriate reference, since the laser light show Edrington put on at its opening celebration the other night reportedly had some people around Speyside claiming to have seen UFOs. The distillery cost £140 million, about $188 million at today's exchange rates. And it's part of Edrington's plan to invest £500 million over the next several years in its flagship single malt. Ken Grier is the Macallans' creative director.
It is an absolutely new benchmark in the world of international spirits. The distillery itself was an architectural marvel. You know, it is, we had to move 500,000 tons of earth to build the distillery. You know, we've built it with 380,000 components in the roof. It's based on a traditional Scottish cairn, you know, these man-made ancient landwalks. So it's man-made, but it sits inside an area of outstanding natural beauty. The layout of the distillery echoes the interior of the reception, which is a double-walled structure based on the Scottish broch, or roundhouse. So you get this repetition of the roundels under it. You get this amazing grass roof. It's a truly beautiful thing. I mean, we did this for a couple of reasons, really. One is we wanted to build something which is truly awe-inspiring and breathtaking. I think we've achieved that. The second really was to position the brand rightly, to give it its home place as being the ultimate luxury spirit in the world's leading cities. Because we want people to come. We want to share the secrets of the Macallan. We want to unwrap all our mysteries for these wonderful, wonderful consumers. And it does give us the ability to produce some more Macallan in the future so that our valued drinkers or drinkers-to-be can enjoy the brand.
It looks a lot, if you look at it just on first glance, like something out of Lord of the Rings in the Shire.
It's fascinating because it's an amazing design, because it's 220 meters long by 60 meters wide, 68 meters wide by 24 meters high. It's a true marvel because you have this incredible glass window which gives you this uninterrupted view over the River Spey. You have this connection to the house back through the cut from the distillery back to our spiritual home. And of course, you have this incredible bar that sits right next to these 3 wonderful still sets, each with 12 stills in them. So you have this fantastic flow, this great aesthetic connection in the whole building between the process, the bar, the retail, and back to our house. And this wonderful meadowland that you see in the roof. The roof is just amazing. I said, 1,800 beams, 2,500 geodesic triangles to make this roof, 380,000 individual components, made from Scandinavian spruce, planed in Germany, put together in Austria, and every single section of that is bespoke and different. It's amazing. You have beauty, complexity, wonderful master craftsmanship putting it together. It's an absolute pantheon in the world of international liquor.
And nobody has ever designed a distillery like this before. You probably ought to give some credit to the architects here, because this is going to go down as an architecturally significant distillery on the order of the Doig pagodas, I think.
I think it is. I think you make a great point there, Mark. This really is as epoch-making as the Doig pagodas. What we've seen there is that nobody else has taken a named and famous architect design consultancy and worked with them intensively to make something which is aesthetically beautiful, but actually is fantastic in terms of the production capability. So Graham Stirk at Roger Stirk Harbour and Partners really took fantastic inspiration from man-made Scottish landforms, planted it into this area of outstanding natural beauty, but then worked intensively with Atelier Bruckner, who put together a visitor centre, to create something that's absolutely seamlessly beautiful. From start to finish, from process to visitor centre to bar to store, it is absolutely, as you said, an architectural piece of brilliance that people want to come and see for the architecture. These great iron beams. There's 1,174 miles of rebar steel in there. There's 17 million pounds worth of concrete into this thing. There's the most incredibly beautiful wooden roof within it. People will come just to marvel at it. You could fit St. Paul's Cathedral from London inside our atrium. You could take the Leadenhall building in London and you could lie on its side, and this building is the size of a skyscraper. It's a beautiful, grand, impressive, and amazing piece. And Graham Stirk at Roger Stirk Harbour and Partners should take amazing credit for his bravery, his vision, his aesthetics within it. It's fantastic. And we can't wait for our friends in the US to come across and enjoy it.
Well, let's put this in perspective now. How many football pitches can you fit inside there?
2.5.
Not bad. You've talked about people coming over. When is it finally going to be open to visitors?
It's going to be open to the general public very soon now. It's actually a week on Saturday, so the 2nd of June. We're eagerly anticipating. The bow wave of interest has been phenomenal. People have been talking about it, trying to get, it's a bit like a new car launch, trying to sneak pictures inside before it's opened. It's become it's incredible amount, an absolute tsunami of interest in this particular place. People that are interested in architecture want to come and see it. People see it's a must come and see Scottish tourism attraction. People are genuinely interested in whiskey want to come there. Our fans want to come to the place. And this is all, as I say, about seeing something that's architecturally beautiful, the most amazing functional distillery. If you want to see one distillery in Scotland, it's got to be this. And of course, what we are doing, because we're very, very proud of everything we do to make the Macallan, we are completely transparent. People can ask any question they want on the process. They can actually watch the process in action. It's designed to really engage at a different level to any other distillery that's ever been out there.
How does the design fit in with the traditional Easter Elchies house next door?
Well, it fits in perfectly. We wanted to design, and that's the reason it's fantastic that part of it is underground, because it really does nestle on top of this wonderful agricultural land, fitting in perfectly with surrounding rolling hills. But we wanted something that was in keeping with the house. The way we've designed it, there is a cut in the ground, which is 8 metres at its widest point, through to 3 metres as you come in through the door. And this really gives you a leading eye down to the house. So the house perfectly fits with the distillery. All the eye line flows back to East Trelke's house. That is our icon. That's our spiritual hope. And that actually beautifully ties together 1700, the date the house was built, and 2018 when the new distillery was there. And there's this wonderful symmetry and subtlety of design where they tie together. We didn't want a massive, structure there that would dwarf the house. We wanted something that was in sympathy to the house and actually made sure it was perfectly bonded to the aesthetic and the estate.
Let's talk about the liquid now. What went into the process of tuning up the stills and the entire process to make sure that the spirit coming out of the new Macallan distillery is equal or as close as possible to the spirit from the original distillery?
Well, if anything, the spirit's going to be better, and I'll tell you why. We spent a ton of time actually analysing, data recording for a good couple of years before we actually got into the final installation on details such as the length of fermentation, the size and shape of our mash tun, the way our washbacks would operate. The stills themselves are a perfect death mask of the stills that we have in the old plant. We're working with Forsyth, who've been our partners in coppersmithing since the 1950s. An incredible amount of very, very careful research to really make sure that nothing material was changed in the process at all. And in fact, we've actually been able to add a couple of improvements. One example, being very transparent, is we now have 4 waters in mashing. At 21 degrees, 78 degrees, 88 degrees, 92 degrees. We used to have 3. So what this has enabled us to do is to take the best of modern technology and make sure that it, in an uninterrupted flow, perfectly melds with the traditional way that we make Macallan. So your cut point's the same, your barley's going to be the same, your yeast's going to be the same, your fermentation time's going to be the same. It's only a couple of subtle changes, and we're delighted to say that the spirit is already A grade after only a very short commissioning time, and is being filled into cask now. And I could really disappoint you, Mark, because I could give you 2 glasses, one with the previous spirit, one with the new spirit, and you'd say, Ken, why are you doing this? Because they both taste the same. So we've done a great job. I also remember that, the importance of wood in the process. The Macallan buys about 80% of the sherry oak wood used in the Scotch whisky industry, and that gives 100% of our natural colour and probably 80% the flavour. So all of that is absolutely unchanged. The same barley, same water, same casks, stills, we perfectly match to the previous stills. It takes 6 months for 6 guys to make a still. They're incredibly skilled fellows. And so we've really taken this seriously. And our guys are all convinced the spirit is absolutely unchanged, if not even slightly better.
Now, you brought up 4 waters. I've never heard of a distillery in Scotland doing 4 waters before in the mashing process. But the question I have to ask, though, is, does that increase your water usage slightly? And what was built into the new distillery to make it more environmentally friendly, other than the design, which creates some cooling, I would assume natural cooling?
I think it's interesting. You make a great point. Let me go to the natural points. I think the sustainable points. I think that's a really great point. On a normal production day, we would be using 100% sustainable energy, which is amazing as a claim. What we've done is we built a biomass power station across the road from the distillery. This uses brash, which is basically all the low branches from a tree that can't be used when it's harvested. So it's very environmentally friendly. We also take electricity from our plant, the combination of Roth's Distillers in Rothes, where we burn draff with wood chips to create electricity. We have, of course, our own spring where we take the water from, so it's naturally filling itself back up with all this gorgeous rainfall we have in Scotland. And we use processed water, we use water from the River Spey for cooling. And that's then completely clean and completely cooled, and actually returned to the river itself. So it's an incredible step change in terms of the use of sustainable energy in this distillery. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that. As well as the fact, aesthetically, people love it because it's It looks incredibly in keeping with the hillside surrounding, with this gorgeous meadowland on it. It's very discreet. And I've got to say, we anticipated, because we're doing something very brave, something contemporary, something new, as we always do at Macallan, we anticipated some degree of polarization. 99% of people that have been round absolutely adore it. And some of the comments have been awesome, amazing, sets a new benchmark, can't wait to come back. So we're really delighted about the way it's gone, Mark.
You won't have whiskey from this distillery on stream for years to come. How are you going to be able to meet the demand between now and then?
Well, again, with Macallan, it's almost about doing things in a very careful way. So we are going to modestly uprate the capacity of what we make on an ongoing basis, but it's not suddenly going to be turning all the pumps on at once. What we're going to do is just very, very carefully curate to make sure that everything is absolutely top quality. We want to build the brand in the right way, in the right outlets for people to cherish it, with the right people who really appreciate the brand. That's not going to change at all, Mark. And what we're going to do is we can probably produce up to a third more. We're going to just gradually ramp up our production there to make sure the liquid is still great quality, it goes to the right outlets, and the right people enjoy it. We're going to be investing £500 million over the next 12 years overall at Macallan in making sure that we have enough Macallan to begin to satisfy the demands of new drinkers, and it's actually at the best possible quality. And that $500 million is going to cover, spending about $25 million a year in casks, more than anybody else in the industry spends. Great sherry casks. Most of the casks used will be first fill as well within that. It's a huge investment there, massive investment in the distillery, investment in a new drain and fill facility, investment in new warehousing. We are absolutely intent on making sure that as the number one single malt by value in the world, that we maintain that position by evolving the way the brand's seen, by great innovation, by superb product quality, and creating an unbeatable experience for people around the world that wish to come and visit.
Let's move over now to the announcement that came out a few weeks ago about the changes in the Macallan ranges that the rest of the world sees now with the current bottlings. Explain the reasoning behind this now, because I think we'd sort of gotten used to that 1824 series with Ruby, Amber, Sienna, and Gold, and I think Sienna is gone now, right? Or is it Ruby that's gone?
Well, yeah, I mean that range will be phased out for a couple of reasons, really. I think one within that is that it's always great to make sure that we evolve, that we are staying ahead of our consumers, that we give them stuff that's new and different. We've had fantastic success with products that are character-led as opposed to age-led. I'll give you a couple of examples. The range that we've had, duty-free, the 1824 collection, now has become Quest. Fantastic success with 1824 collection. We're now finding the new Quest range is over 20% up on the previous sales of those other products. So that's massively successful and hugely important to us. Rare cask, we now are in a situation with rare cask that we could more than sell everything we make on that. And that's a $300 whiskey, that looks absolutely fabulous, tastes brilliant, and is a huge success. The success of M Decanter has been amazing. No age statement there, and just an absolute phenomenon. Everything we sell is sold out time and time again. So products that are character-led as opposed to age-led have been massively successful for the Macallan and really driven by us, the leaders in innovation. So it's been a huge success. The decision really to kind of withdraw 1824 series was, it was a great success. It gave us some really interesting propositions for people to lather up into. The liquids were great. We just thought that we had the ability, given the way the stock model was moving, to really introduce three very, very clear styles of the Macallan domestic markets. The style being sherry oak, so principally European sherry with some American sherry oak casks in there, but principally European. Double cask has been a massive success. It's now doubled in scale from what it was last year. Doubled in scale. It's been a massive success. And that is really a very careful balance, between American and Spanish. So rather than be more sort of European or Spanish influence, it's a real good balance. And finally, we have Fine Oak, which is this casual, elegant product, which is the mix of American sherry, European sherry, and a little bit of American ex-bourbon. And those three pretty much cover all the bases in a way that makes it very easy for consumers to understand and make choices by occasion or preference. And also having 3 12-year-olds, at that level gives real choice of style, against that key price point, that age. So that was the reason we did it. We did it really because we like to keep evolving and changing. We did it because we wanted to keep it simple for consumers in our core ranges. And it absolutely continues to leave us that fantastic space to do amazing character-led whiskies.
I am under the impression, at least from what I heard last night following the party, that there are at least 2 new whiskeys coming out that are helping to sort of celebrate this, including a really, really old one. Can you tell me about those yet?
It's a little bit embargoed at the moment. I can't say too much, but just to whet your appetite, you will have something which were the oldest Macallan released commercially, which is hugely exciting. And this is something which will be incredibly iconic, amazingly beautiful. We are sure it will just rock everybody back on the heels. And then we have something there that, we think we should reward those people that come to see us. And we have something that's very special, something that's very beautiful, and something that I know I'm going to have in my home. My son-in-law today just asked me to buy him one when it's released. So we have different price points, different ways of celebrating this fantastic, momentous opening. And there's some great stories. Now, as you would expect from Macallan, amazing liquids, but also beautiful packaging and something that adds real utility. So we'll tell you a bit more about this probably, I suspect, another 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. I've seen pictures of the bottles already, though, so they've already hit Twitter as of Wednesday or Tuesday night. But let's talk about the events on Friday in Hong Kong at Bonhams with the 1926 Macallans that broke that $1 million point.
It's incredible. I mean, it's something that, again, we're very, very proud because, previously we had a world record of $460,000 for the Sierra Padu bottling, followed by the Imperial at $628,000. We had that tremendous $993,000 sale of the 6 Lady Panthers. This is yet again a new benchmark for the Macallan. The Macallan accounts for just under 30% by value of all whiskies sold at auction. It's phenomenal. And what we're finding is that, our price has been rising very, very steadily. The prices have just jumped again. The fact is that people recognise we're the only really investment-grade Scotch. They recognise supreme beauty in the way we present it and amazing quality in the liquid. And people are really getting into this big style, either to drink, collect, or in some people's cases, invest. So for us, it's a real joy. There were only 24 in the world of those bottles. They were gifted to very special customers and friends of the distillery at that point. I know the provenance of these bottles, and it's incredibly exciting for the buyer to own them. We have one of each on display in our jewel case in our new Macallan visitor experience. So if you want to tell everybody, anybody in the world can come and see those. They're not locked away in a dusty cabinet. They are in somebody's safe. You can come and see these at the Macallan. They are incredibly beautiful. 1926 is as rare as hen's teeth. And the aesthetic on these bottles, a beautiful pen sketch nude by Adami, is stunning. The incredible Blake bottle with its pastiche of a Scottish game fair or country fair, it looks tremendous. And they're things of wonder. And these, to me, are as rare as the Koh-i-Noor diamond, finding Tutankhamun sarcophagus. These things are just exceptional. It's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And I'm very, very proud that the kudos to the Macallan, the cachet, is represented by this sale, the value that's been placed on them. And we're tremendously excited and very, very proud.
And on that note, the drinks business reported Tuesday that another one of the 12 Sir Peter Blake 1926 Macallans will go on the auction block at Sotheby's in New York City later this year. We'll have more details as they're available. That's WhiskyCast In Depth, brought to you by Lagavulin, the legendary Islay single malt. Look for the classic 16-year-old, the Distillers edition, and the new 8-year-old Lagavulin at a whiskey shop near you. Find out more at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. I had the chance to taste both of the new Method and Madness whiskies last month when I was in Dublin. Let's start off with the single pot still Hungarian oak finish. It's bottled at 46% ABV. The nose has notes of tree fruits, soft oak, and mild spices, along with campfire ashes, a slightly earthy touch of garden soil, and a nice meaty touch of roast beef juices. The taste is thick and meaty, with great spicy notes of clove and cardamom, along with sawdust and a hint of honey, while water brings out notes of butterscotch and toffee. The finish is dry and woody, with touches of sandalwood, incense, and potpourri. I'm scoring the Method and Madness Hungarian Oak finish a 93. Now, the Method and Madness Port Single Cask was distilled back in 1989, then moved to a port pipe in 1995. It's bottled at 56.1% ABV, and the nose is sweet and succulent, with red grapes, plums, raisin, and molasses cookies. The taste is dark, rich, and thick, with spices that build up slowly, then take over with clove, cardamom, and allspice, balanced nicely by a touch of orange marmalade. The finish is long, dry, and mouth-tingling with subtle spices. It's excellent, and I'm scoring the Method and Madness 28 years old Ruby Port Pipe Single Cask a 94. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, our tasting notes are brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery, where they're making room in the trophy case after the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. Best Bourbon, Henry McKenna Single Barrel. Best Small Batch Bourbon, Elijah Craig Small Batch. Just more proof of Heaven Hill's pedigree for making whiskeys with award-winning flavor. Meet the family at heavenhilldistillery.com. Think wisely, drink wisely. Last month, we mentioned a special limited release from Maker's Mark. It's referred to as Seared BU13 and was an experimental batch for the Maker's Mark Private Selection range that used a special test set of so-called sous vide parboiled staves that were then seared. It's bottled at 55.35% ABV, or 110.7 proof, and it's only available in Kentucky. The nose has emphatic notes of toffee, butterscotch, and honey, along with muted spices. The taste has a good, complex balance of spices with honey, butterscotch, and toffee notes, while the finish is long and well-balanced with fading spices and hints of sweetness. It's not your typical Maker's Mark, which is why this is a one-time-only edition, but I'm scoring it a 92. And finally, I've been going back through samples that fell through the cracks when the Whiskey Ferry first delivered them. For instance, the Rosebank 21-year-old from Diageo's 2014 Special Releases series. This one was bottled at 55.3% ABV. The nose is malty and complex, with cocoa nibs, caramel, candied orange slices, soft spices, and vanilla. The taste is nice and fruity, with mango, orange, and pineapple notes, along with a hint of cinnamon and touches of barley sugar and coconut in the background. The finish is long with citrus fruits, a lingering touch of cinnamon, and crystallized ginger. I'm scoring the Rosebank 21-year-old from Diageo's 2014 Special Releases series a 93. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery, and I'm adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of nearly 2,200 different whiskeys at WhiskyCast.com.
This is whiskey. Johnny Walker's Scotch Whisky, from this place and these places in that place. These are the people that make it, aging in oak for 12 long years. See, the land that shapes these people and the people that shape this whiskey all shape how bloody good it tastes. Bold as it is complex, for every step you take, this is Johnny Walker Black Label, friends. Step right up. Can I drink this now?
Johnny Walker Black Label Blended Scotch Whisky, 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
Let's open up the inbox now for Your Voice, brought to you by Lot 40. One of the things we do a lot of around here is rumor control. Someone hears something from someone who probably heard it from a friend, and then it hits social media and explodes. Eventually, someone passes it on to us, asking whether that rumor is true or not. The other night, Jim Cronin in Ohio did just that, and here's his tweet. I heard from a friend in Kentucky that the entire state has sold out of Blanton's. It has all been pre-purchased by the Japanese market ahead of the tariff war. Is this true? Are there other bourbons being pre-purchased in full production quantities? Well, I can't answer that last question. I seriously doubt it, though. But as for Blanton's, keep in mind that while it is distilled at Buffalo Trace, Sazerac only holds the U.S. distribution rights for the various Blanton's expressions. The brand is actually owned by Age International, which held on to Blanton's and a handful of other bourbon brands after Sazerac bought the old George T. Stagg distillery and renamed it Buffalo Trace. So we took Jim's question straight to someone who would know the actual answer, Sazerac CEO Mark Brown. He responded in an email, and I'm going to quote now from that email. There is no truth to a rumor that all of the Blanton's is being shipped in Japan in advance of any potential tariff war. Consistent with past and ongoing practices, each state, country has and continues to have its own specific allocation, and there is no swapping around of allocations. Demand for Blanton's does continue to grow at a faster rate than our stocks of aged whiskey, which is causing periodic outages in stores and bars in all markets. As previously communicated, we are investing heavily in expanding our capacity so that we can catch supply up to demand. And after we posted Mark Brown's response on Twitter, the folks at Central Kentucky Tours responded with a tweet that has a pretty good explanation for the Blanton's shortage. Quoting now, Warehouse H, about 18,000 barrels, 6-year-old bourbon, 3,000 barrels at most per year for bottling, minus any that do not meet the profile. More bourbon drinkers wanting Blanton's equals natural shortage. Kentucky math. Yeah, that pretty much explains it right there. Last month, Chef John Currents told us about the inaugural Oxford Bourbon Festival and Auction in Oxford, Mississippi, to benefit Move On Up Mississippi. The festival wrapped up on Sunday, and Chef John passed along word that the auction raised $65,000, while the entire festival raised about $120,000, all to help kids in Mississippi. Congratulations, and we're already looking forward to going down there for next year's festival. On that note, we mentioned the Drams for Fams campaign a while back to benefit local food banks that was organized by the Edrington Scotch Club, and whiskey clubs around North America are taking part this month. This Sunday, May 27th, I'll be joining the Scotch Test Dummies for a guest appearance as they do a Drams for Fams online fundraiser on their YouTube channel. We'll be tasting some Springbank single malts and having a lot of fun. The festivities start at 3 p.m. New York time, 8 p.m. or 2000 hours GMT, and I hope you'll join us. In the meantime, if you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always post it on the Your Voice page at whiskycast.com or track us down on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your Voice is presented by Lot 40, Canada's award-winning 100% pot still rye whiskey. Lot 40, unapologetically Canadian. Please drink responsibly. Let's wrap things up now with Behind the Label, our inside look at some of the science, history, and other things that make whiskey unique. The other night, I pulled a dusty bottle off the shelf, White & Mackay blended malt that I picked up in Scotland about 10 years ago. I blew off the dust, poured a dram, and then posted a picture of the bottle and glass on social media. Some folks Instagram their food. I Instagram my whiskey. William Long from Queensland, Australia, posted this note on LinkedIn. My grandfather has a bottle of this sitting on the shelf. I remember always being fascinated by the two lions down the bottom. Well, there is a story behind those lions. Longtime White & Mackay master blender Richard Patterson was happy to share it with us.
Well, White & Mackay has two lines in the label from the very start when James White, Charles Mackay got together. You know, their roots go back to 1844, but they wanted to remember their ancestors. And if I recall that it was after the Battle of Glenprune, around about the 23rd of February, 1603, when the MacGregors attacked the Cahoons at this particular battle. And it angered the King James so much that after the battle, when there was around about 100 people killed, he said, these MacGregors are the most outrageous clan in living history. So we're going to, curb their viciousness and their outlandish. And they said, well, if your name is MacGregor, if you don't change your name, you're going to suffer pain of death, as it was said. So many names they chose were Skinner, Smith, but the one that took the majority was the name White. So when James White, Charles Mackay got together to form their company, White & Mackay, they took the lion from the single lion of the Clan MacGregor emblem, and then they took the single lion from the shield of the flag of Scotland, which is often used. So these are the two lines that were taken, and they were, the rampant lines were kept. The MacGregors, in fact, didn't get their name back until about 1874, so it was some years later that they finally got their name, but they still to this day retain the single clan, lion to represent their history. So that's the reason for the two lions. But of course, they were always facing the left-hand side, and it wasn't until Emperador we changed the company logo, and we've now taken them virtually out of the earth and showing all their muscles, and we're now facing, let's say, the right-hand side.
So if you've seen a White & Mackay bottle recently and thought there was something a bit different, that's the reason. And thanks to Richard Patterson for explaining that key piece of his company's history for us on Behind the Label. If you have something you'd like us to get the backstory on for Behind the Label, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. Of course, that's also where you'll find links for our WhiskyCast Tasting Panel podcast, brought to you by the Whiskey Exchange, and our WhiskyCast HD videos, along with the latest whiskey news, events, my tasting notes, photos, cocktail recipes, and a whole lot more, including a complete archive of all of our past episodes. We have changed the format for WhiskyCast just a bit over the past few weeks, and would love to get your opinion on the changes. Let us know what you think on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Tumblr at WhiskyCast, or you can email us. The address is comments@whiskycast.com.
WhiskyCast, brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
This is Whiskey, Johnny Walker's Scotch Whisky, from this place and these people, aye, Scotch makers, creating the bold and complex flavour of Johnny Walker Black Label. Step right up.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2018, and comes to you twice each week from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.